investment.
If you took the existing VR systems and made them 80% cheaper, there's still not a huge market, right? There's still not a really incredibly compelling reason for people to spend 20 hours a day in VR, right?
And I think the idea behind VR has always been a great one. I mean, even if you're a hater, take out all the issues the technology had and continues to have, you can't tell me that core concept, transporting you into the game, isn't at all intriguing.
Alright guys, it is Dope as J bringing you guys another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Metaverse, we're going to be talking about virtual reality, and how Metaverse is essentially a dead concept at this point in time, and how the virtual reality market is panning out in 2025 versus years, right? And in the future, something like virtual reality and where it could potentially go. So to start off, let's talk about Metaverse. Metaverse was this big, hyped up, and overly marketed and advertised concept. Started with Mark Zuckerberg back in like 2020, especially in 2021. They placed this big bet on Metaverse being the next big thing in the tech space, right? And if you guys remember, like back then in 2020 and 2021, the Quest 2, the Meta Quest 2, previously known as the Oculus Quest 2, was a huge hit. Sold a lot of units, a lot of people got their hands on it, and it was this next big thing. So they had a huge install base with that, right? And they believe that they can translate the user base of the Quest users to something like Metaverse. But beyond that, expand Metaverse to people who don't own virtual reality technologies, right? And to pretty much sum up what the Metaverse is, it's essentially a virtual space that can be accessed through virtual reality technologies, right? So you have virtual worlds with their own socialized settings, and the concept of something like the Metaverse was very interesting to look at back then, but the reality is the concept never turned into something substantially good, right? I think that the intentions of what they wanted Metaverse to be was heavily geared towards investors and shareholders and trying to capture a market where they can generate a lot of revenue. And obviously, like as a business, you want to be able to do that, right? A space like that, you want to be able to take that product and convert it into something that can make you a lot of money. But the execution has to be there. And the biggest issue is that the execution of that product, of Metaverse, never panned out, right? And it failed for a lot of reasons, right? Like a lot of the iterations and projects of Metaverse were really bad. They were poor performing, right? Like they performed poorly. A lot of them didn't look good. A lot of the avatars were bad. The social spaces they weren't interesting, right? And when I think about Metaverse, right, I think about something like PlayStation Home. PlayStation Home was really ahead of its time back in the day on the PS3, if you guys remember that. If you guys were like PS3 users and you remember PlayStation Home, that was essentially Metaverse before Metaverse, right? This social hub where you can make your own avatar and go into these different social spaces. They had their own in-game economy where you can buy clothes and build your own social space, like your own home and things like that. So that's what I was thinking, right? I was like, how can you take something like PlayStation Home and modernize it, right? Even something like VR chat is like, it's the reality of what they wanted Metaverse to become, right? But they didn't have the execution of it, right? So let's get into this, because I found this very fascinating when I was researching, Metaverse recently and VR technologies. And I was like, how is Metaverse doing in 2025, right? So Meta burned through $45 billion on Reality Labs since 2020, right? Essentially placing a huge bet that Metaverse and Metaverse-related technologies were going to be this big, huge thing this decade moving forward, right? And it's insane to see such a huge, sharp decline in what Metaverse could have been. Because if you guys remember, the Oculus Quest 2, which is now the Meta Quest 2, was a huge hit a couple years ago, right? And now you have the Meta Quest 3 and the different versions of that headset. And you also have other VR headsets on the market as well, right? But the user base of the Quest 2 was so huge that they thought they were going to be able to convert that into Metaverse users. But there is also a lot of issues that come with VR headsets, right? Me, I on the Quest 2 used it a good bit. And one of the issues that I encountered was VR sickness, the motion sickness that can be occurred when using VR headset. And it's one of the worst kinds of motion sickness that you can get. Like, people get boat sick, car sick, right? I've been car sick once or twice in my life. It did not feel as bad as the motion sickness I felt from using the VR headset after like 30, 40 minutes. It was crazy. I would play games like Super Hot, and some other like shooters on VR, right? And the motion sickness was just bad, right? But another thing is just like the public interest of something like Metaverse and VR shifted really fast as well. Remember, Metaverse was the big thing in tech. Well, it was supposed to be the big thing in tech. Then it shifted to AI, which AI has captured the public interest of the broader population as well as investors, right? And when I think about something like Metaverse, I thought Metaverse was very, very interesting as a concept, right? And being able to access it using VR is also really, really good, but they just failed. And I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in regards to hype cycles, failed hype cycles, marketing and advertising of certain products and how it doesn't convert with the end user at the end of the day, and how they fail. And I think that, you know, Meta is a good like case study of like how projects can come and go. Same thing with Microsoft as well. Like Microsoft has a lot of failed projects, right, and a lot of failed products. I think the Metaverse thing really, really has to be studied because remember, during the pandemic, everybody was at home. There was this huge digital boom. A lot of people were gaming. A lot of people were online. So they seen those numbers and they seen those metrics, and they're like, okay, you know, let's try to turn the greater population into bots, essentially. Like, oh, you're gonna be this antisocial person that does nothing but stay at home and access Metaverse. They were talking about accessing Metaverse during work and stuff like that, and it was just so weird. But let's talk about the VR market, because the VR market is something that's very, very interesting to analyze. In the previous decade, I'll say about 2017, 2019, I was really, really against virtual reality technologies. I didn't think it was where it should have been at the time. I didn't even think it was something appealing for me. And so I went to my friend's house and tried out the Samsung Odyssey headset. I was like, oh shit, like this is actually pretty cool. I played Blade and Sorcery for the first time. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I got hands-on with it, right? And then I got the Quest 2, and seeing the success of the Quest 2, I was like, oh, virtual reality has a big future ahead of itself, right? If the adoption rate was there, which it was with the Quest 2, and even to a certain degree Quest 3, even PSVR 1. PSVR 1 sold really, really well, relative to something like the PSVR 2, which I think is at around 2 million units sold. But the technology was moving forward in a great direction, and it still is to this very day. Like, the VR technology is evolving and moving at a really, really steady pace, right? But the virtual reality market has been declining, and there's a lot of global economic causes for this as well. But overall, the VR market is shrinking, right? In Q1 of 2025, the global VR headset market declined 22% year over year and 60% quarter over quarter, right? And even the Meta Quest 3 is seeing a huge drop in their sales as well. So they're not selling as many units as they did a couple of years ago, right? And I think that virtual reality is also another great case study of, hey, like, it's a great technology. There's a lot of different use cases for it. In gaming specifically, there's just a small market of people who are consistently using VR headsets and gaming on it, right? Like I said, like, I had really, really bad motion sickness, so I can't use the VR headset and game for an extended period of time, like I could just do sitting on my screen or hopping on my console, hopping on my PC and just playing, right? So I think that there's a lot of hurdles and, you know, just a lot of things that they have to overcome with the VR headset. So I want to, let me know your thoughts in the comment section about the future of virtual reality. Let me know your thoughts about Metaverse. Even something like PlayStation Home. Like, tell me about your PlayStation Home experience if you ever used it, okay? Make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe, and I'm out. Peace.